He promised to cherish me forever, placed a ring on my finger and called me his world. But when life got hard, he left me like I was nothing. But then, I made sure he'd never know peace in the arms of another. They say wedding vows are sacred. They say when someone looks into your eyes and says, for better or for worse, they mean it. I believed that. I believed him. His name was Ian. And to me, he was everything. The calm after every storm, the hand that held mine when the world turned cold. When he proposed, he didn't do it with flashy lights or an expensive ring. No, he did it the way I always dreamed, on a quiet rainy night, with trembling hands and eyes full of emotion. I want to grow old with you, Aisha, he whispered. You're my home. Back then, I thought I was the luckiest woman alive. We had dreams, simple ones. A little house with white curtains. 2 kids and a garden full of marigolds. I worked as a school teacher. He was building his career in finance. We didn't have much, but we had each other. And I thought that was enough. But love, I would learn, is a fragile thing when it's built on lies. The first crack came not with an affair, not with a fight, but with silence. When his job got stressful, he started coming home late. It's just work, he'd say. You don't understand the pressure I'm under. I tried. God, I tried. I made his favorite meals. I stayed up just to greet him with a smile. But he began to look at me like I was a burden instead of a partner. And then came the days when he wouldn't come home at all. I questioned nothing at first. I trusted him like a fool, thinking love was enough to anchor a drifting heart. But I wasn't blind. I just didn't want to see. Then, one night, everything changed. He came home at 2 a.m., smelling of perfume that wasn't mine. Lipstick on his collar, not red like mine, but coral. Bright, bold coral. I stood there in silence as he looked at me with no guilt, no fear, just annoyance. You're still up? He said coldly. I told you not to wait. And that was it. That was the moment the man who promised forever broke every vow in a single breath. But the worst wasn't the cheating. The worst was how easily he discarded me afterward, like I was a phase he'd outgrown. He stopped pretending. Stopped lying. Moved out 2 weeks later with a single suitcase and a note that said, "Don't make this harder than it needs to be." We both knew this wasn't working. No apology. No explanation. Just emptiness. He left me drowning in the wreckage of everything we built. And she, the woman he left me for, she looked like everything I wasn't: loud, glamorous, unbothered. They posted pictures within a month. Matching outfits. Weekend getaways. Hashtags like #finallyhappy and #reallove. Each post felt like a knife in my chest. But I didn't comment. Didn't confront. I just watched. Because sometimes silence isn't weakness, it's strategy. And while they celebrated their stolen love, I was already planning how to make sure Ian would never find peace again, not in her arms, not in anyone else's. You see, I wasn't the woman he left behind. I was the storm he unknowingly created. And I was just getting started. The first few weeks after he left were a blur. It wasn't just heartbreak, it was humiliation. I couldn't sleep in our bed without smelling him. I couldn't look at our wedding photos without shaking. The apartment echoed with the sound of his absence. Every corner reminded me of a promise broken. My friends tried to comfort me, but how do you explain to people that your soul feels like it's bleeding from wounds no one can see? I lost weight. Lost interest in food, in conversation, in life. I barely went to work. I kept thinking, wasn't I enough? Didn't I love him hard enough? But love isn't a currency men like Ian ever value. What they crave isn't loyalty. It's control. And when I stopped begging, when I stopped texting, when I didn't collapse into his arms crying, I think it unsettled him. Because one day, weeks later, he called. Not to say sorry, but to say, I hope we can stay civil. Civil. After shattering me into pieces, he wanted peace. After calling our love a mistake, He wanted friendship. And that's when it clicked. He didn't leave me because I was too much. He left because I had stopped being easy to manipulate. And he couldn't stand that kind of woman. So I played the part. I replied to his message with a single line. Of course, Ian. No hard feelings. And he believed me. That was his mistake. You see, betrayal doesn't always ignite fire immediately. Sometimes, it builds like smoke in the lungs. Quiet, invisible, suffocating. And by the time the fire comes, it's too late to escape. That's how I began crafting his undoing. I started with small things. I reached out to one of his coworkers, Ria, under the pretense of friendly catching up. She didn't know he left me for another woman. He hadn't told anyone that part. Men like him care about their image more than they care about truth. So I fed her gentle lies. He's been going through a tough time, I said. I just hope she's not another one of his distractions. Ria raised an eyebrow. She. I nodded. The one he left me for. You didn't know? And just like that, the rumor began to spread softly, strategically. I didn't accuse. I only suggested. And people believe suggestions far more easily than accusations. At the same time, I started rebuilding myself, physically, emotionally, socially. I joined a fitness class, changed my hair, reclaimed my wardrobe. Not for him, for me. Every morning, I looked in the mirror and reminded myself, I was not broken. I was becoming. And still, he kept flaunting her. New car, new condo, new girlfriend. But I noticed the cracks, the overdone smiles, the stiff body language, and once, a bruise on her wrist, visible in a mirror selfie. He was starting to become the man I always feared he'd be. The man he had carefully hidden behind sweet words and soft touches. But now, he wasn't hiding. And neither was I. Because while he thought I was still quietly grieving, I was gathering everything. Screenshots, bank statements, work behavior, even whispers from women I'd never met, but who had stories that sounded eerily like mine. Stories they were too scared to share. But I listened. And I remembered. And I collected evidence. He wanted to start a new life. I wanted to bury the one he built on lies. And by the time I was done, he wouldn't just lose his job, his girlfriend, or his reputation. He'd lose the very thing he never gave me. Peace. There's something deeply poetic about watching someone unravel with the same hands they used to destroy you. Ian thought he had moved on. Thought he'd upgraded. Thought leaving me behind made him a freer man. But what he didn't realize was, the woman he ran to wasn't who he thought she was. Because I made sure of it. Her name was Tora, a marketing manager at a cosmetics brand. Pretty, charming, and from what I gathered online, ambitious. But also insecure. The kind of woman who needed constant validation. And I knew just how to use that. I created a fake account. A faceless profile with an elegant display photo, the kind she couldn't resist following back. I didn't attack her. I praised her. Commented on her outfits. Her success. Slid into her DMs like a supportive stranger. And then, one night, I wrote, "You're too beautiful to be wasting time on a man with a past like Ion's." She replied in less than a minute. What do you mean? I waited an hour before responding. Make her feel the suspense. Then I sent her an anonymous screenshot, an old message of Ian flirting with a girl while we were married. I made sure to blur just enough to make it seem real, but unclear enough to keep her digging. Tara didn't know it, but I had planted a seed. And every seed grows if you water it with just the right amount of doubt. Meanwhile, I kept feeding Ion's office the truths they didn't want to hear, but had already begun to suspect. Little things. His missing hours. The misfiled reports. The late-night business dinners that didn't match his credit card statements. HR started snooping. His boss asked for a review. The walls were closing in, but he was too arrogant to see it. Because men like him always think they're untouchable. One night, I got a text from an unknown number. Just one word. Why? It was Tara. And I knew. She had begun to see it. So I replied from my fake profile. Because I used to be her. I didn't need to say more. The rest. She'd find out on her own. She started pulling away from him. Canceling plans. Not posting pictures with him anymore. Ian noticed, of course. His temper returned, the same way it once had with me. He called me once, drunk, slurring. You're poisoning her against me, he spat. I stayed quiet. Don't think I don't know what you're doing, Aisha. And then, for the first time, I said something he didn't expect. I'm not doing anything to her, Ian. I'm just helping her see the man I lived with. Click. That silence was delicious. I knew he was unraveling because the next day, he showed up at my apartment. Uninvited. Desperate. His eyes were wild. His hair messy. He looked nothing like the man who once stood at the altar swearing to love me forever. Aisha, please, he began. But I didn't let him finish. You should go, I said coldly. You've already made your choice. Now live with it. He stepped closer. Tara's acting strange. She thinks I cheated on her. You've been talking to her, haven't you? I tilted my head, smiling for the first time in months. Why would she think that unless it was true? And that's when it hit him. This wasn't grief anymore. This was war. He didn't know how to fight a woman who wasn't begging anymore. A woman who had learned to smile while setting fire to everything he thought he'd rebuilt. And he had no idea just how much he was about to lose next. After Ian showed up at my door, the panic in his voice echoed in my ears for days. He was spiraling. Not because he lost me, no. He never cared enough for that. He was spiraling because the two pillars that held up his ego, his job and his new girlfriend, were beginning to shake. And it wasn't because I shouted or begged for justice. It was because I whispered. People like Ian live off the illusion of control. Once that illusion begins to crack, they unravel faster than anyone expects. And that's exactly what I was counting on. A week after his outburst, I got a call from one of his old colleagues, Ria, the one I'd accidentally fed that first seed of doubt 2 months ago. She didn't even greet me. He's under investigation. I played dumb. Who? Ian. There's talk about misusing client funds. Skipping audit deadlines. And someone submitted screenshots of him texting clients after hours, crossing lines. My heart didn't race. It pulsed with purpose. I thanked her, said I hoped it wasn't true, and ended the call. But deep inside, I smiled. Because I knew exactly which screenshots they were talking about, the ones I had anonymously sent in. The ones that were real, but oh so perfectly timed. He was being audited. Watched. Whispered about in corridors where he once walked like a king. At the same time, Tara completely wiped him from her social media. Her captions turned bitter, cryptic. Loyalty means nothing to some people. It's funny how people call you dramatic after they destroy you. She didn't need to name him. Everyone knew. Ion's perfect little castle was now infested with cracks. And he tried to patch them up with more lies. Told his friends I was bitter. Told Tara she was insecure. Told HR that the allegations were fake. But when you spend years building a tower of lies, it doesn't take much for it to fall. Just one match. And I wasn't done burning. The real revenge came next. Ian once left his old laptop in our storage closet. After he moved out, he never asked for it. Maybe he forgot. Maybe he didn't care. But I never touched it until now. I powered it up, guessing the password on the 3rd try. His mother's name and Tara's birthday. Men like him are always predictable. What I found: emails, photos, conversations he had while we were married, flirting with strangers, arranging business dinners that ended at hotels, mocking me for being too emotional with his friends. One audio message from him to a friend still haunts me. She's too soft. Always crying about something. Honestly, I feel suffocated. She doesn't even realize she's boring. Boring. That word hit harder than cheater. Because I had built a life with him. Cooked, loved, waited, stayed. And he saw it all as boring? I sent that audio file to myself. And I sent a copy, anonymously, to Tara. Along with a video of him checking into a hotel with another woman, timestamped just a week before he left me. The next morning, Ian posted a black story slide on Instagram. Sometimes people betray you when you least expect it. It got 3 likes. I laughed. That same afternoon, he showed up at Torres' condo with flowers. But she didn't let him in. The doorman told him she'd left instructions. He's not welcome here anymore. Later that week, HR suspended him pending further investigation. His friends started ghosting him. The girl he left me for blocked him. And the man who once stood so tall in my life was now crumbling under the weight of his own choices. But I wasn't finished yet. Because regret is a quiet punishment. I wanted his to be loud and eternal. Ian stopped posting on social media. His WhatsApp DP vanished. His stories disappeared. His carefully curated life, once all polished smiles and expensive dinners, faded into silence. But silence is never empty. Sometimes, it screams. I knew what was happening. He was drowning. Not in guilt. He never had the heart for that, but in exposure. The walls he once built from charm and confidence were now stained with rumors, betrayals, and undeniable proof. And the one woman who had believed his promises after me? She now hated him too. But the world wasn't done turning on him yet. A week after Tara dumped him, she did something bold, something that made my blood rush with icy satisfaction. She posted a carousel of images. Their messages, the hotel footage, and one damning voice memo where Ian admitted to lying to her because she couldn't handle the truth. Her caption? To the next woman. Run. I didn't. And I paid for it. It went viral, shared, reposted, screenshotted. She didn't mention his full name, but enough people knew. Enough coworkers, friends, and clients saw it. And by the end of that week, Ian's company terminated his contract. Not suspended. Terminated. And while he watched the world he built crumble, I was building mine back up. Not with revenge, but with freedom. I started painting again. I had stopped after we got married because it made a mess. I began volunteering at a shelter, something I always wanted to do, but never had time for because he needed me home. I reconnected with old friends I had lost under the pressure of being a perfect wife to a man who only valued silence and submission. And for the first time in years, I looked in the mirror and saw me. Not his wife. Not his shadow. Not his afterthought. Just me. But peace wasn't what I sought for him. Because Ian still had one thing left. A reputation. Even after all of this, some people still called it a misunderstanding. Some blamed Tara. Some thought I had gone too far. And it would have been easy to leave it there, let the world guess. But I didn't want whispers. I wanted clarity. So, I wrote a letter. Not to him. To every woman he might ever meet again. I detailed it all, without bitterness, without exaggeration. Just the truth. Cold. Precise. Undeniable. And I posted it on a women's support forum. Not under my name. Not even under his. Just under the title. If he tells you I was crazy, read this first. It spread like wildfire. Because pain recognizes pain. And suddenly, strangers were messaging me with their own stories of men like him. Of manipulation. Of isolation. Of walking away from relationships while bleeding and still apologizing. And I realized something. This wasn't just about revenge anymore. It was about voice. Mine. Theirs. Ours. Ian lost everything. His job. His partner. His credibility. And more than that, he lost control. He could no longer rewrite the narrative. He couldn't twist the truth into something softer. He couldn't smile through the mess. Because everyone knew. And what's worse than being hated? Being seen for what you truly are. The last time I saw Ian, he wasn't the man I once married. No pressed collar. No proud posture. No confident smirk. Just a shadow of what used to be. It happened by accident, or maybe fate had a sense of humor. I was sitting at a cafe, journaling, sipping coffee, sunlight pouring in through the windows like a blessing I never knew I needed. Then I saw him, standing across the street, staring in. Our eyes met. And in that split second, I didn't feel fear. I didn't feel hate. I felt indifference. He slowly walked in, as if unsure of whether he belonged in a world where I was no longer broken. "Can I sit?" he asked, voice strained. I nodded. He looked around nervously, like the walls themselves might judge him. His clothes were wrinkled, and there was a tiredness under his eyes that no amount of sleep could fix. "I lost everything," he said finally. I waited. My job, my friends, even Tara. She told everyone. I can't even go on LinkedIn without someone tagging me in a post calling me a narcissistic manipulator. I didn't flinch. He leaned forward, eyes desperate. "You did this. You turned them against me." I tilted my head. "No, Ian. You did that. I just gave the truth a voice." He clenched his jaw. "I loved you." "No," I said gently but firmly. "You loved owning me. You loved the reflection of yourself you saw when I was too tired to fight back." He stared at me like I had spoken a language he never learned. For years, I had rehearsed what I would say if I ever got this moment. Part of me thought I'd scream, cry, ask why. But now that I was here, I didn't need closure. I was already free. He reached into his pocket and pulled out the ring he once gave me. "I kept this," he murmured, placing it on the table. "It meant something once." I looked at it. That tiny band of metal had once symbolized a promise. Now, it was just a reminder of everything he had shattered. "You can keep it," I said, pushing it back toward him. "You'll need something to remember the last person who ever truly loved you." He winced, and I watched as those words hit him harder than any scream ever could. He tried to say something else, but I stood up. "I hope someday you understand," I said softly, "what it means to truly lose someone who gave you everything." And then I walked away. Not from the table. Not from the man. From the ghost of the girl who once needed him. That night, he texted me. "You were right," but I didn't reply. Because some stories don't deserve a reply. Some stories only deserve an ending. And mine was just beginning. Ian didn't message me again after that night. Not a word. Not a call. Not an apology. But I heard about him through others. Whispers carried like smoke, his short stints at new companies ending mysteriously, his name tainted in industry circles. He tried freelancing, but every time he applied for a gig, someone would bring up that post, that thread, that woman who warned the rest of us. It followed him. Like karma in digital ink, impossible to delete, impossible to outpace. Meanwhile, I found peace in the little things. A morning spent painting by the window. Coffee with a friend I hadn't seen in years. She cried when she saw I was smiling again. A new job offer from a company that valued compassion as much as experience. They asked me in the interview, "What motivates you?" And I said, without hesitation, "Resilience." Because I had bled in silence. I had shattered quietly. But I had rebuilt every broken piece of myself, not into what I used to be, but into something far stronger. I moved into a sunlit apartment by the sea. The walls were bare at first, but I slowly filled them with my art, pieces that told a story of pain, survival, and rebirth. And one night, during a gallery showing, a stranger stopped in front of my favorite piece. A canvas of a woman standing tall in a burning field. He looked at me and asked, "Is this about revenge?" I smiled gently. "No," I said. "It's about reclamation." Ian would never understand that word. To him, everything had always been about control. possession. Keeping what looked good in public, no matter how much it hurt in private. But now, he had nothing to hold on to. I'd heard he was trying to date again, but it never lasted. Maybe it was because his reputation always caught up with him. Or maybe it was because he couldn't find someone soft enough to mold, but strong enough to stay. He looked for me in every woman, but the me that no longer existed. The one who once cried when he came home late, who clung to his excuses like lifelines, who believed in love like it was stronger than betrayal. That woman was gone, and in her place stood someone he would never deserve again. Someone who no longer gave away her soul just to be held at night. Someone who had learned that sometimes the most powerful revenge isn't destruction. It's evolution. And that, I realized, was the greatest punishment of all. He would spend the rest of his life searching for what he threw away. And everywhere he turned, he'd only see reflections of his failure. Not because I haunted him, but because he destroyed the only place he was ever truly loved. Years passed. Not in a blur, but in sharp, beautiful moments I finally learned to savor. And somewhere in those years, I stopped looking over my shoulder. Stopped wondering where Ian was, what he was doing, if he was still paying the price for what he did to me. Because by then, it didn't matter anymore. He had faded from my world like a story that no longer needed to be told. But fate, oh, fate always waits for its final bow. One rainy afternoon, I received an invitation. A women's empowerment organization was hosting a panel titled Rebuilding After Emotional Ruin. They had found my anonymous post, the one I had written years ago, and tracked me down. Would I be willing to speak? I said yes. Not for him, but for every version of me who had ever stayed silent. The night of the event, I stood on a softly lit stage, microphone in hand, staring into the eyes of women who wore the same pain I once did. Some still healing. Some still breaking. All of them brave. I told them everything. The love, the lies, the leaving, the silence, the survival. The storm I became when I stopped begging for shelter and learned to become the thunder. And when I finished, there was a pause. A silence filled not with pain, but power. Then the room erupted in applause. Some cried. Others stood. And as I stepped off the stage, woman after woman hugged me and whispered, "Thank you for saying what I couldn't." And I realized, this was what he could never take from me. My voice, my truth, my ability to turn my deepest betrayal into someone else's beginning. That night, I received a message on a forgotten account. From Ian. Just 2 words. I saw. No context. But I knew exactly what he meant. He had watched the event. Maybe he stumbled on it. Maybe he had been watching me from the sidelines all these years, quietly tracking the woman who had once loved him so fiercely. Or maybe someone had sent it to him, telling him, "This is what you lost." And that was the moment I knew. My revenge was complete. Not because he hurt. Not because he lost. But because he saw me rise. And he would have to live every day knowing. He had the kind of love people write stories about. And he threw it away like it was disposable. Only to watch the woman he broke become a voice for every woman after her. He had broken me once. But I built a life so radiant, so whole, so untouchable, that he could never even stand in the same light again. So if you ask me if I still think of him, no. But I know he thinks of me. Every time a new woman walks away sooner than I did. Every time someone asks about that post. Every time he looks in the mirror and sees not a man, but the ghost of everything he destroyed. Because in the end, he promised to cherish me forever. Placed a ring on my finger and called me his world. But when life got hard, he left me like I was nothing. But then, I made sure he'd never know peace in the arms of another. Not because I ruined him, but because I walked away and never looked back.